The interrogation room smelled like copper and fear. Staff Sergeant Garrett Rourke sat hunched over a metal table, hands cuffed to a steel ring bolted into concrete. Blood had dried beneath his nose in dark rivulets. His right eye was swollen shut, the flesh around it purple and yellow. His left eye, the one that still worked, tracked movement like a trapped animal searching for an exit that didn't exist. The recording light blinked red in the corner. "State your name for the record." The voice behind the camera was female. Calm. Clinical. The kind of voice that had asked these questions 1,000 times before. Rourke's jaw worked. His throat moved when he swallowed. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked like old leather. "Staff Sergeant Garrett Michael Rourke, service number 8046329. Can you explain how you sustained those injuries, Sergeant?" A long silence. The kind that stretched until it became its own answer. The air conditioning hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. Rourke flinched at the sound. "We didn't know," he whispered. The camera operator said nothing. "We didn't know she wasn't supposed to be." He couldn't finish the sentence. His remaining eye was glassy, unfocused. The look of a man who'd seen his entire world collapse in the span of 60 seconds. "Wasn't supposed to be what?" Rourke looked directly into the lens. His voice dropped to barely audible. "A hunter." The screen went black. White text appeared against the darkness 72 hours earlier. The California sun beat down on Interstate 5 like a hammer on an anvil. Heat shimmers rose from the asphalt in waves, distorting the horizon where Camp Pendleton sprawled across 18 miles of coastal real estate. January in Southern California meant 70 degrees and cloudless sky. Most of the country was buried under winter. Here the world burned bright and merciless. A silver sedan with Nevada plates merged onto the Stewart Mesa Road exit. No government markings, no military decals. Just another civilian vehicle in the stream of traffic that flowed past the base gates every hour of every day. The woman behind the wheel drove with her left hand loose on the steering wheel, her right resting on her thigh. She wore aviator sunglasses that hid her eyes. Dark auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Jeans, gray t-shirt, running shoes. Nothing about her screamed military. Everything about her was military. Lieutenant Commander Sloan Maddox checked her rearview mirror out of habit. Clear. She'd been checking mirrors for the last 300 miles, not because she expected a tail, but because 26 years of life and 8 years of training had taught her that complacency killed faster than bullets. The memories came without invitation. 6 years earlier, Arlington National Cemetery, November rain. Sloan stood beside a flag-draped coffin, watching water bead on polished mahogany. She was 20 years old, fresh out of boot camp. Her dress blues were new enough to still smell like the factory. The fabric hadn't yet learned to conform to her body. Her brother lay inside that box. Corporal Dane Maddox, 24 years old, Marine Infantry, 2 tours in Afghanistan. Purple Heart, Combat Action Ribbon. A record that should have been the beginning of a long career. Instead, it ended in a bathtub in base housing at Camp Lejeune. Wrists opened by his own hand. A suicide note left on the counter that Sloan had memorized despite wishing she could forget. They said I was lying. They said decorated Marines don't do things like that. They said I should think about my career before I made accusations I couldn't prove. I can't live with the truth if no one will believe it. I'm sorry, Sloan. Tell Mom I tried. The chaplain spoke words that meant nothing. The honor guard fired their rifles into gray sky. The bugler played taps. 7 men in dress blues folded the flag with mechanical precision and handed it to their mother, who held it like it might bring her son back. Sloan stood at attention, dry-eyed, already making plans. 3 months later, she applied to NCIS. 6 months after that, she was accepted into their Special Activities Division. The people who investigated crimes inside the military that the military didn't want investigated. Dane's case file sat in a box marked closed. Insufficient evidence. No further action recommended. Sloan had spent 6 years learning how to reopen boxes like that. How to find evidence that didn't want to be found. How to make people tell truths they'd spent years burying. She was about to put those skills to use. The memory faded. The present reasserted itself. Interstate 5, Camp Pendleton. Mission Day. Another memory surfaced. More recent. More painful. 2 years earlier. Naval Medical Center, San Diego. Oncology ward. Master Chief Thaddeus Blackwell lay in a hospital bed that looked too small for a man who'd spent 50 years being larger than life. Cancer had eaten through him like acid. The body that had once carried 80 pounds of gear through Grenada in 1983 now barely filled out a hospital gown. but his eyes were still sharp, still clear, still the eyes of a warrior who'd taught 3 generations of Marines how to survive when survival seemed impossible. Sloan sat beside the bed holding his hand. It felt like paper and bone. "I'm dying, kid," Blackwell said. His voice was a rasp. The morphine made his words slow, but his meaning was diamond hard. "But you're not. You've got work to do." "Thorne, don't..." "Listen." He squeezed her hand with what little strength remained. "I spent 30 years trying to root out the rot. Started in '95, found a pattern at Camp Lejeune. Assaults, cover-ups, command, looking the other way. I reported it. They buried me, transferred me to recruiting duty in Nebraska, kept me away from anything that mattered until I retired." His breath rattled. The heart monitor beeped its steady rhythm. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'd seen patterns that weren't there, but then your brother..." His eyes found hers, held. "Dane's death wasn't your failure. It was mine. I should have fought harder, should have blown the whistle louder. You did everything you could. I did what the system allowed. That wasn't enough." He reached for something on the bedside table. His movements were slow, deliberate. When his hand came back, it held a knife. The blade was 8 inches of blackened steel, Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife British Commando issue. The kind of weapon that had been obsolete for 40 years, but still killed just as efficiently as the day it was forged. The handle was wrapped in worn leather. On the crossguard, barely visible, 3 words had been carved in letters so small you had to know they were there to find them. "Patience defeats chaos." "I carried this in Grenada," Blackwell said. "October '83. We were the second wave going into Point Salines. First wave got chewed up by anti-aircraft fire. Our Black Hawk took 3 rounds through the tail rotor. Pilot set us down hard in the jungle, 2 miles from our objective. 4 of us, 50 Cuban soldiers between us and safety." He pressed the knife into Sloane's palm. His fingers were cold. "I wanted to run, wanted to fight, wanted to do something. My sergeant grabbed me. Old hand from earlier conflicts. He said, 'Patience, Blackwell. Let them make the first move. Always let them reveal themselves. Because once they do, they can never hide again.'" We waited 6 hours, didn't move, didn't make a sound, and one by one those 50 soldiers walked past us. Never knew we were there. When the last one was gone, we walked to the beach. Extraction arrived 2 hours later. His breathing was labored now. Each word cost him. "That sergeant taught me something. Predators hunt by instinct, but hunters hunt by choice. Predators react. Hunters wait. When you go after them, and you will go after them, I know you remember that. Be patient. Let them reveal themselves. And when they do..." He couldn't finish. The morphine was taking him under. His eyes closed. Sloan leaned close. "What happens when they reveal themselves?" Blackwell's eyes opened one last time. A ghost of his old smile crossed his face. "Then you bring the chaos." He died 6 hours later. Sloan sat with him until the end. When the nurses came to disconnect the machines, she walked out of the hospital with the knife tucked into her jacket. She'd carried it every day since. The main gate of Camp Pendleton appeared ahead. 2 armed sentries. Concrete barriers arranged in a serpentine pattern to slow approaching vehicles. A guard shack with bulletproof glass. Sloan pulled up to the checkpoint and rolled down her window. The guard was young, maybe 22. His face hadn't yet learned to hide what he was thinking. His eyes went to her face, then to her civilian clothes, then to the rental car's Nevada plates. The progression was textbook. Civilian, female, alone, low threat assessment. He was wrong on all counts. "Afternoon, ma'am. Purpose of visit." Sloan handed him a folder through the window. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a seal embossed at the top. "Department of the Navy, Naval Criminal Investigative Service." The words "Priority Authorization" ran across the header in red ink. The guard opened the folder, scanned the first line. His entire posture changed. Shoulders straightened. The casual friendliness drained from his expression like water from a broken glass. "Ma'am, I'll need to make a call. Take your time." He disappeared into the guard shack. Through the tinted windows, Sloan watched him pick up a phone, speak urgently into it. "Listen, speak again." His free hand gestured as he talked. Whatever he was hearing on the other end made his face go pale. When he hung up, he stood there for a moment, staring at the phone like it might offer guidance. He didn't want to come back out, but he did. "Commander Maddox," he handed the folder back through the window. His hand trembled slightly. "You're cleared for entry. Lieutenant Quinn will meet you at the Visitor Processing Center." A pause. Welcome to Pendleton, ma'am. Sloan took the folder without comment and drove through the raised barrier. In her rearview mirror, she watched the guard pull out his phone again the moment she passed. Making another call, warning someone. Good. Let them warn whoever they wanted. By the time anyone figured out why she was really here, it would already be too late. The Visitor Processing Center sat near the main administrative complex, a low-slung building with faded paint and windows that hadn't been cleaned in months. Sloan parked in a space marked Official Visitors and sat for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. She studied the building's exterior. 3 cameras, 2 visible, one hidden in the eave above the entrance. Standard coverage? The door was solid core with a magnetic lock. Card reader beside it. The parking lot had clear sight lines in all directions. No ambush points, no blind approaches. She grabbed her duffel from the trunk. Inside was everything she'd need for the next 72 hours. Clothes, toiletries, a laptop encrypted with protocols that would make NSA analysts weep, and wrapped in a towel at the bottom, Blackwell's knife. The door to the processing center opened before she reached it. A man in digital camouflage utilities stepped out, hand extended. Smile fixed in place like a mask he'd forgotten how to take off. Commander Maddox, his voice was too loud, compensating. Lieutenant Barrett Quinn, I'll be your escort during your stay. Sloan shook his hand. His palm was damp. He held the grip half a second too long, like he was trying to prove something. When he released, his eyes slid away from hers, focusing on a point over her left shoulder. Lieutenant, please come in. Colonel Thorne is expecting you for a brief at 0700 tomorrow, but I'll get you situated first. Quarters meal card base access. He was talking too fast, filling silence with words. How was the drive? Traffic can be brutal coming down from Vegas. It was fine. Inside the building smelled like floor wax and old coffee. Quinn led her past a reception desk where a clerk pretended to be absorbed in paperwork. Down a hallway lined with framed photographs of past base commanders dating back to World War II. Sloan let her eyes track across the faces as she walked. Men in dress blues, men with ribbons and medals earned in places like Iwo Jima and Fallujah and Helmand Province. Men who'd built legacies on honor and sacrifice. She wondered how many of them would recognize what their legacy had become. Quinn stopped at a desk piled with folders and began sorting through them with unsteady fingers. Your temporary ID badge will be ready in about 20 minutes. In the meantime, I'll need you to review and sign these access forms. Standard protocol for oversight assignments. Sloan took the forms, scanned them quickly. Locations she was authorized to enter. Systems she could access. Chain of command notification procedures. Everything by the book, everything designed to give her just enough access to conduct an official review while keeping her contained within acceptable boundaries. What the forms didn't say was that the sealed orders in her duffel superseded every restriction on these pages. She signed without reading the fine print. Quarters are in the temporary lodging facility, Quinn continued, still not meeting her eyes. About a mile from here, near the hospital complex. A little out of the way, but it should be quiet. Quiet, isolated, away from the main barracks where people might see her coming and going. That'll work. Quinn smiled again. The expression never reached his eyes. Great. I'll drive you over once we get your badge sorted. In the meantime, can I get you anything? Coffee, water? I'm fine. He nodded and returned to shuffling papers, fingers still unsteady. Sloan settled into a chair and watched him work. Watched the way his gaze kept drifting to her duffel bag, like he was trying to figure out what was inside. Watched the way he checked his phone 3 times in 5 minutes, thumb hovering over the screen. He was nervous. That was expected. What was interesting was the specific flavor of his nervousness. This wasn't the anxiety of a junior officer meeting a senior officer. This was the anxiety of a man who knew something was wrong but couldn't quite identify the shape of the threat. The printer behind the desk whirred to life. Quinn retrieved a plastic ID badge and handed it over with the same forced smile. All set, Commander. If you'll follow me. The temporary lodging facility was exactly as isolated as Sloan had anticipated. A cluster of single-story units on the far edge of the base, separated from the nearest occupied building by 300 yards of scrub grass and chain-link fence. Each unit had a small porch door with a keyed deadbolt and windows with curtains that hadn't been updated since the Cold War. Quinn pulled up outside Unit 12 and killed the engine. This is you. Keys are in the lockbox by the door. Code is 3792. Wi-Fi passwords on the desk inside. He paused, working up to something. Commander, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly is the scope of your assessment here? There it was, the question he'd been holding since the guard shack. Sloan turned to look at him directly for the first time, watched his throat work as he tried to hold her gaze and failed. Inner service combat readiness and integration protocols, she said. The official cover story straight from the paperwork. Standard oversight rotation. Right, of course. He nodded too many times. Well, if you need anything, my number's on the contact sheet in your welcome packet. Don't hesitate to reach out. She grabbed her duffel and climbed out without another word. Oh. Waited on the porch until his vehicle disappeared around the corner, taillights fading into the late afternoon glare. Then she went inside. The unit was exactly what she'd expected. Single room with a bed, a desk, a chair, and a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. The air conditioning rattled but produced cold air. The windows faced east, which meant morning sun but afternoon shade. Sloan locked the door, checked the windows, swept the room for surveillance devices she didn't already know about. Found two. One camera in the smoke detector, one audio pickup in the phone on the desk. Both standard-based security, not targeted surveillance. She left them in place. Let them watch. Let them listen. By the time anyone reviewed the footage, it wouldn't matter. She unpacked methodically. Clothes in the small dresser, toiletries in the bathroom, laptop on the desk powered on but not yet connected to the network, and the knife unwrapped from its towel secured in a belt sheath that clipped inside her waistband at the small of her back. The handle was worn smooth from decades of use. The blade had been sharpened and resharpened so many times the original factory edge was just a memory. On the crossguard, those three words. Barely visible unless you knew where to look. Patience defeats chaos. Sloan ran her thumb along the engraving. Felt the ghost of Blackwell standing beside her, his voice low and gravelly in her memory. Let them make the first move. Always let them reveal themselves, because once they do, they can never hide again. She secured the knife and opened her laptop. The screen came to life, showing a desktop empty except for a single encrypted folder. She entered a 32-character password from memory and waited while layers of security peeled back one by one. When the folder finally opened, it contained a single document marked with seals that could end careers. Operation Sunlight, Eyes Only, NCIS Special Activities Division, Subject Camp Pendleton Climate Assessment, Predatory Pattern Analysis. Sloan began to read. The document was 37 pages long. It contained incident reports, transfer requests, medical records with certain details redacted, but patterns visible like bones beneath skin. It contained testimony from women who'd left the service broken. It contained communications that had been deleted but never truly erased. It contained the architecture of a system designed not to protect predators, but to make protection unnecessary by ensuring that nothing was ever officially seen. By page 12, Sloan's jaw was clenched so tight her molars ached. By page 20, her hands had formed fists on the desk. By page 37, she closed the laptop and sat in silence for a long time, breathing slowly, letting the anger settle into something colder and more useful. Then she opened a blank document and began typing her preliminary observations. Day 1. Initial assessment based security awareness. Moderate. Guard response time to classified orders suggests advanced warning protocols already in place. Primary liaison officer Lieutenant Quinn nervous. Evasive eye contact. Excessive courtesy masking anxiety. Possible knowledge of investigation parameters. Recommend surveillance. Physical environment isolated quarters consistent with segregation protocol. Suggests awareness of my presence unwelcome among certain command elements. Preliminary conclusion. Pattern recognition active. They know something is wrong. They don't yet know I'm the correction. She saved the file, encrypted it, uploaded it to a secure server that existed in no official directory. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. Orange and red painted the sky in shades that looked like fire seen through smoke. Sloan stood and moved to the window. Somewhere on this base were 4 men who thought they owned the spaces between the official and the unofficial. 4 men who'd learned that the uniform could be a license instead of a responsibility. 4 men who had no idea that 72 hours from now, they would be sitting in rooms very much like this one, trying to explain how their world had ended so fast they never saw it coming. She pulled the curtain closed and began to prepare for tomorrow. Morning formation happened at 05:30 while the world was still caught between darkness and light. Sloan stood on an observation deck outside the main administrative building, coffee in hand, watching 300 Marines move through their routines in synchronized chaos. They ran in formation, called cadence, filled the pre-dawn air with the sound of boots on asphalt and voices raised in unison. Most of them were good, Most of them were here because they believed in something larger than themselves. Most of them. Sloane's eyes tracked through the crowd until she found what she was looking for. Four men running together near the back of the formation. Not leading, not obviously shirking. Just occupying a space that put them close enough to observe without being observed. The one on the left was broad-shouldered, moving with the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. The one beside him was thicker through the chest, with a boxer's build and a face that looked like it enjoyed violence. The third was lean with nervous eyes constantly scanning, holding a phone in one hand even while running. The fourth was younger, struggling to keep pace, trying too hard to match the other's stride. Staff Sergeant Garrett Rourke, Corporal Lucas Brennan, Specialist Owen Cavanaugh, Private Tyler Winslow. The Raptors. Formation broke at 0600. The Marines dispersed toward chow halls and barracks and duty stations. Sloane watched the four men peel off from the main group and head toward a different building entirely. A structure that sat on the far edge of the training complex, like a forgotten appendix. She checked her watch, noted the time, filed it away. At 0700 sharp, she presented herself at Colonel Marcus Thorne's office. The colonel's aide, a corporal who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, ushered her inside without preamble. The office was exactly what Sloane had expected. Flags in the corners, plaques on the walls commemorating units and operations, a desk that had probably been issued during the First Gulf War and survived through sheer bureaucratic inertia. Behind the desk sat Colonel Marcus Thorne, 54 years old, 28 years of service, combat veteran with a Silver Star from the push to Kuwait City in '91, 2 tours in Iraq during the invasion, 1 tour in Afghanistan, a record that should have been exemplary. Should have been. Thorne stood when she entered, extended his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive, professional but not warm. "Commander Maddox, welcome to Pendleton." A pause. "Coffee?" "I'm fine, sir. Have a seat." He gestured to a chair positioned deliberately to put the morning sun at her back, forcing her to squint or shift position. An old interrogation trick. Establish dominance through environmental control. Sloane sat without adjusting, let the sun burn into her shoulders, met his gaze without blinking. "I understand you're here for a readiness assessment," Thorne said, settling back into his own chair. "Inter-service integration protocols." "That's correct. Forgive me for being direct, Commander, but we've had 3 such assessments in the last 18 months. My staff is stretched thin as it is. I'm hoping we can make this as efficient as possible." Sloane pulled a tablet from her bag and placed it on the desk between them. "I'll need access to training schedules, unit rosters, and incident reports for the last 36 months. I'll also need authorization to observe live training exercises and conduct interviews with personnel across all ranks." Thorne's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. A recalibration, a reassessment. "That's fairly comprehensive for a standard integration review." "I'm thorough." "Apparently." He leaned forward slightly. "Commander, I need to be frank with you. This base runs on trust. My Marines need to know that oversight is about improvement, not persecution. If they sense that someone's here looking for problems rather than solutions, morale suffers. Cohesion suffers. And when cohesion suffers, readiness suffers." There it was, the first gentle push, the suggestion that her presence was the problem, not whatever she might find. Sloane kept her voice level. "Colonel, I'm not here to damage morale. I'm here to ensure that the protocols we've established to protect our personnel are being followed. If they are, my report will reflect that. If they're not," she let the sentence hang, "my report will reflect that too." Thorne held her gaze for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes when she mentioned protecting personnel. A micro-expression, recognition, guilt. He knew exactly why she was here. Then he nodded slowly and reached for his phone. "Corporal, get me the G3 shop. Tell them Commander Maddox will need access to our training databases." He hung up and looked back at Sloane. "You'll have what you need by this afternoon. In the meantime, Lieutenant Quinn will remain your liaison. If you encounter any issues accessing facilities or personnel, let him know." "Understood." "Good." Thorne stood, signaling the meeting's end. "Commander, one more thing." Sloane stood as well. "My door is always open. If you have concerns, bring them to me first. Chain of command exists for a reason." Another gentle push. Another attempt to establish control over information flow, to ensure that if she found something, he'd know about it before anyone else, which meant he already suspected what she might find. "I'll keep that in mind, sir." She left the office with Thorne's words echoing in her mind. Bring them to me first. The same thing commanders had been saying to investigators for decades. The same thing Dane's commander had probably said to the chaplain who first heard his complaint. The same thing that had gotten her brother killed. Outside, Lieutenant Quinn was waiting with a forced smile and a manila folder. Commander, your access credentials. You're cleared for most facilities on base. A few require escort, but those are marked in the documentation. Sloan took the folder, flipped through it, standard stuff, building access codes, computer login protocols, emergency contact numbers. I'd like to see the old recreation facility on the east side, she said. Quinn blinked. That's unrestricted. I can take you there if... Just need to know where it is. Right. He pulled out a base map, pointed. Here, it's mostly used for off-duty PT now. Not much happening there during duty hours. Good to know. Sloan took the map and walked away before he could offer anything else. She'd learned what she needed from that exchange. Quinn knew the facility mattered. He just didn't know that she knew. The rest of the morning was spent in a windowless office in the G3 shop, scrolling through 3 years of training records and incident reports. To anyone watching, she looked like exactly what her cover story suggested, a by-the-book officer checking boxes on a compliance audit. But Sloan wasn't reading for compliance. She was reading for pattern. Incident Report 2019-0847. Female Marine reports hostile work environment in Bremen. Command recommends informal counseling. Case closed. Transfer request 2022-0034. Female Marine requests immediate transfer to different duty station. Reason personal. Approved. Medical record 2020-0891. Female Marine treated for training-related injuries. Bruising consistent with impact trauma. No follow-up required. Incident report 2021-0392. Female Marine reports inappropriate behavior by fellow service member. Command finds insufficient evidence. Case closed. One by one, the fragments assembled themselves into a mosaic. Not obvious? Never obvious. Just a subtle pattern of women disappearing from the base. Their exits marked as voluntary. Their complaints marked as unsubstantiated. Their injuries marked as routine. And beneath it all, if you knew where to look, the same names appearing in proximity. Not as accused, never formally accused, just present, orbiting nearby when things went wrong. Staff Sergeant Garrett Rourke, Corporal Lucas Brennan, Specialist Owen Cavanaugh. By noon, Sloan had compiled enough fragments to confirm what the sealed orders had suggested. By 1300, she'd identified 6 women who'd left the base within 6 months of filing complaints. By 1400, she'd cross-referenced their departure dates with maintenance logs, showing security cameras offline at the old recreation facility. The pattern wasn't subtle anymore. It was screaming. She closed the database and sat back in her chair, alone in the small office, listening to the hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of a base going about its business. Then she pulled out her phone. The first call went to voicemail. The second was answered and immediately hung up. The third rang 20 times before someone picked up. Hello. The voice was female, wary, already half regretting answering. Is this Briar Montgomery? A pause. Calculation happening on the other end of the line. Who's asking? My name is Commander Sloan Maddox. I'm calling from Camp Pendleton. I understand you were stationed here until... I know where you're calling from. The voice had gone flat, dead. And I'm not interested. Ms. Montgomery, I understand you left the service after... I said I'm not interested. Whatever report you're filing, whatever box you're checking, do it without me. I'm done with all of it. I'm not here to check boxes. Sloan kept her voice steady, calm, the way you'd speak to someone standing on a ledge. I'm here because I believe you, and I'm here to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Silence on the other end, not the silence of someone who'd hung up, the silence of someone deciding whether to hope. They told me no one would believe me, Briar said finally. Her voice was barely above a whisper. They told me it was my word against theirs, against decorated Marines with combat records and commendations. They told me I should think very carefully about my future before I made accusations I couldn't prove. Who told you that? The colonel, the chaplain? My own company commander. A bitter laugh. Everyone except the people who should have been listening. I'm listening now. Another long pause. Sloan could hear breathing on the other end, could hear the war happening inside this woman's head. Trust versus survival. Hope versus hard-learned caution. You're calling from a number I don't recognize, Briar said. For all I know, you're recording this so they can build a case against me for slander. I'm not recording, and I'm not building a case against you. I'm building a case against them. The men who hurt you, the men who threatened you, the men who made you leave. The silence stretched so long Sloane thought the connection had dropped. Then she heard it. A small sound. Not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. Something in between. His name was Garrett Rourke, Breyer said. Staff sergeant, Bronze Star. Everyone loved him, charming, funny. The kind of guy who'd remember your birthday and bring donuts for the squad. What happened? Thursday night, I'd gone to use the cold plunge after a long day. He came in with two others. Brennan and Kavanaugh. They locked the door. Her voice had gone mechanical now, reciting facts like reading from a report. They said things, did things. When I tried to leave work, told me that if I reported it, they'd make sure everyone knew what kind of woman I really was. He said I'd be the one who got court-martialed for conduct unbecoming. He said no one would believe me. Did you report it? Of course I reported it. I went straight to my chain of command, filed a formal complaint, gave testimony. Another bitter sound. They investigated for 2 weeks, found no evidence, recommended I receive counseling for stress. 6 months later, I requested a transfer. They were happy to approve it, got me off the base before I could cause any more problems. Where are you now? Working retail in a strip mall in Bakersfield, living with my parents. 32 years old, and I'm back in my childhood bedroom because I couldn't prove what 4 men did to me in the dark. Sloane closed her eyes, counted to 3, opened them. Ms. Montgomery, I need you to understand something. I'm not like the people who didn't believe you. I'm not here to make this go away. I'm here to make them pay. How? By doing exactly what they did, by making them think they're safe, by making them comfortable enough to reveal who they really are, and then by documenting every second of it so thoroughly that no one will ever be able to say it didn't happen. For the first time, Breyer's voice carried something other than despair. You're going to set them up. I'm going to give them an opportunity. What they do with that opportunity is on them. And if they take it, if they do to you what they did to me, then they're going to learn that not everyone breaks as easily as they think. Breyer was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger. What do you need from me? Your testimony. Official. On record. Along with any documentation you still have. Medical records, text messages, emails, anything that proves a pattern. I kept everything. There was steel in her voice now, tempered by fire and ready for the fight. Every email, every text, every photo of every bruise. They told me to delete it all. I told them I did. A sound that might have been a smile. I lied. Can you send it to me? Sloane provided an encrypted email drop. Ms. Montgomery, this is going to get loud. When it does, they're going to come after you. They're going to call you a liar. They're going to try to discredit everything you say. Let them try. Breyer's voice was iron now. I've been waiting 2 years for someone to give a damn. If you're that someone, I'll walk through hell to help you. You might have to. Good, because hell is exactly where they belong. The call ended. Sloane sat in the silence of the small office. Then she made the next call. By evening, she had spoken with 4 survivors. Each conversation followed the same terrible rhythm. Initial wariness, gradual trust. Then the flood of details they'd been holding behind crumbling dams for months or years. Addison Blake, 24. Still on base. Still seeing her attackers every day in the chow line. Still flinching when doors closed too loudly behind her. Her voice over the phone was quiet, controlled. The kind of control that came from practice. From having to hold yourself together in public while everything inside was screaming. I can't use elevators anymore, Addison said. Can't be in any enclosed space with men I don't know. Last week I had a panic attack in the supply closet because someone closed the door behind me without warning. Tell me what happened. Thursday night, 8 months ago, I'd stayed late at the gym, wanted to use the cold plunge to help with muscle recovery. The facility was supposed to be open until 2200. A pause. Breathing. Rourke came in first, said he didn't realize anyone was there, started making small talk, asked about my training, my unit, normal stuff. Then Brennan showed up, then Kavanaugh with his phone out saying he was just recording a workout video for Instagram. Her voice cracked. I knew something was wrong. The way they positioned themselves. Rourke by the door, Brennan between me and the exit. But I told myself I was being paranoid. These were Marines, decorated NCOs. They wouldn't. What happened next? Brennan grabbed my arm. Not hard at first, just enough to keep me from leaving. Rourke locked the door, and Kavanaugh kept filming while they said things, did things. And the whole time Winslow stood outside the door, keeping watch, making sure no one interrupted. Did you report it? The next morning went straight to my company commander. He listened, took notes, said he'd look into it. A week later, he called me back. Said the investigation found insufficient evidence, that it was my word against 3 decorated Marines. He suggested I might have misinterpreted friendly banter as something more sinister. Suggested I talk to the chaplain about stress management. Sloane's grip tightened on the phone. The worst part, Addison's voice was barely audible now. I still see them every day. They smile at me in formation. Rourke asked me last week if I was feeling better. Like nothing happened. Like they didn't destroy my ability to feel safe in my own uniform. That's about to change, Sloane said. How can you be sure, Bahan? Because I'm not bound by the same rules they use to protect themselves. And because I don't care about being liked or fitting in or playing politics. I care about justice. Addison was quiet for a moment. When I heard someone fought back last night, when I heard the rumors about someone putting Rourke and Brennan in the infirmary, I didn't believe it. I thought it was just wishful thinking. It wasn't, Sloane said, and it's not over. The next call was to Rhea Sullivan, 22 years old, 3 weeks removed from her assault. Her voice shook throughout the entire conversation. They said I wanted it, Rhea whispered, said I must have been asking for it by being there alone at night. But I wasn't alone. There were other people in the building. I thought I was safe. You were never safe, Sloane said. Not because of anything you did, but because they chose to be predators instead of protectors. I sent you photos. Did you get them? I did. Purple and yellow handprints, defensive wounds on your forearms, bruising consistent with restraint. My company commander said those could have come from training, from combatives drills. He said unless I had proof it was intentional assault, there was nothing he could do. He was wrong, and he's about to find out exactly how wrong. By the time Sloane finished the 4th call, the sun had set completely. Her quarters were dark except for the glow of her laptop screen. She sat in silence for a long time, letting the weight of those conversations settle. 4 women, 4 stories. Same pattern, same predators, same system that enabled them. She opened her laptop and began compiling everything into a single encrypted file. Testimony, photos, medical records, transfer requests, a mosaic of evidence that painted a picture impossible to ignore. Then she accessed a server that didn't officially exist and began her real work. The file directory appeared on screen, labeled with an innocuous name that would mean nothing to anyone who stumbled across it. But Sloane knew what she was looking for. She entered a series of credentials, waited while security protocols verified her identity, 3 layers deep, 4, 5. The folder opened. Inside were 83 video files, each one time-stamped, each one labeled with a cryptic alphanumeric code, each one a piece of evidence that Chief Master Sergeant Victor Creed had been collecting for 4 years. Sloane opened the first file. The video quality was surprisingly good. Professional camera work, stable footage, someone who knew what they were doing. The location was the cold plunge room at the old recreation facility. The timestamp read 2021-06-17-22-34-18. 3 men entered the frame, 2 in PT gear, 1 holding a phone. A woman was already in the room, early 20s, athletic build. She turned when she heard them enter, smiled, said something Sloane couldn't hear because the video had no audio. Then the smile faded. Sloane watched for 30 seconds, saw enough to understand. Closed the file with her jaw clenched so tight her molars ground together. She didn't need to watch the other 82 videos. She understood the system now. Victor Creed wasn't just protecting predators, he was documenting them, recording their assaults, keeping the evidence as leverage, as control, as an insurance policy that ensured no one under his protection would ever turn on him, because doing so would mean destroying themselves. It was brilliant in its cruelty, diabolical in its simplicity, and it was exactly what Sloane needed to burn his entire operation to the ground. She copied the folder to 3 separate encrypted drives, uploaded it to 2 different secure servers. Then she composed a message to Commander Alara Voss at JAG. Located primary evidence. Creed has been documenting assaults for leverage. 83 videos spanning 4 years. Multiple victims. Multiple perpetrators. This is bigger than Rourke's crew. Recommend immediate coordination. The response came back within minutes. Jesus Christ. Copy secured. JAG spinning up task force. Do not engage until backup is in place. Repeat. Do not engage. Sloan stared at the message. Then she typed back. Acknowledged. But if opportunity presents, I'm taking it. The response was 2 words. Be careful. Sloan powered down the computer and sat in the darkness of her quarters. Outside, the base continued its nightly rhythm. Marines finishing shifts, lights going out in barracks. The machine grinding forward, oblivious to the cancer growing in its belly. She stood and walked to the window, touched the knife at her back, felt the engraving under her fingertips. Patience defeats chaos. Somewhere out there, 4 men were planning their next hunt. Thursday nights. That's when they operated. That's when the facility had the lowest traffic. That's when they felt safest. Tomorrow was Wednesday. She opened the encrypted folder one more time, scrolled through file names until she found something that made her stop. She opened it. Inside was a document that looked like a journal. 6 months of entries, dates, names, locations, details that were too specific, too consistent to be fabricated. Tyler Winslow had been documenting everything, and according to the last entry dated 3 days ago, he wanted out. Can't do this anymore. Saw Kavanaugh show the new LT at Supply some of the videos. Bragging, said there are officers involved too. Field grade, maybe higher. If I report it, Rourke said I'm dead. If I don't, I'm complicit. Don't know what to do. Sloan read the entry 3 times. Officers involved, field grade, maybe higher. This was bigger than 4 predators at one base. This was a network. She checked the file metadata. It had been uploaded to the server 2 days ago, which meant Winslow had access to Creed's system, which meant he was either part of it or documenting it or both. She composed another message to Voss, found additional evidence. Private Tyler Winslow has been documenting network activities. Journal indicates officer involvement at field grade or higher. Recommend priority interview. Then she looked at the calendar on her phone. Wednesday, November 13th, 2012. Tomorrow would be Thursday. Thursday night was when they hunted. Sloan made her decision. She could wait for backup, should wait for backup. Let JAG build their case carefully over weeks or months, or she could give them everything they needed in one night. She touched the knife at her back one more time. Patience defeats chaos. But Dane didn't have time to be patient, and neither did whoever they were planning to hunt tomorrow night. Sloan began preparing for what came next. By evening, Sloan had spoken with 4 survivors. Each conversation followed the same terrible rhythm. Initial wariness, gradual trust. Then the flood of details they'd been holding behind crumbling dams for months or years. Addison Blake, 24, still on base, still seeing her attackers every day in the chow line, still flinching when doors closed too loudly behind her. Her voice over the phone was quiet, controlled. The kind of control that came from practice, from having to hold yourself together in public while everything inside was screaming. I can't use elevators anymore, Addison said. Can't be in any enclosed space with men I don't know. Last week I had a panic attack in the supply closet because someone closed the door behind me without warning. Tell me what happened. Thursday night, 8 months ago, I'd stayed late at the gym, wanted to use the cold plunge to help with muscle recovery. The facility was supposed to be open until 2200. A pause, breathing. Rourke came in first, said he didn't realize anyone was there, started making small talk, asked about my training, my unit, normal stuff. Then Brennan showed up. Then Kavanaugh with his phone out saying he was just recording a workout video for Instagram. Her voice cracked. I knew something was wrong, the way they positioned themselves. Rourke by the door, Brennan between me and the exit. But I told myself I was being paranoid. These were Marines, decorated NCOs. They wouldn't. What happened next? Brennan grabbed my arm, not hard at first, just enough to keep me from leaving. Rourke locked the door, and Kavanaugh kept filming while they said things, did things, and the whole time Winslow stood outside the door, keeping watch, making sure no one interrupted. Did you report it? The next morning, went straight to my company commander. He listened, took notes, said he'd look into it. A week later, he called me back, said the investigation found insufficient evidence, that it was my word against 3 decorated Marines. He suggested I might have misinterpreted friendly banter as something more sinister, suggested I talk to the chaplain about stress management. Sloan's hand tightened on the phone. The worst part? Addison's voice was barely audible now. I still see them every day. They smile at me in formation. Rourke asked me last week if I was feeling better. Like nothing happened, like they didn't destroy my ability to feel safe in my own uniform. That's about to change, Sloan said. How can you be sure? Because I'm not bound by the same rules they used to protect themselves. And because I don't care about being liked or fitting in or playing politics. I care about justice. Addison was quiet for a moment. When I heard someone fought back last night, when I heard the rumors about someone putting Rourke and Brennan in the infirmary, I didn't believe it. I thought it was just wishful thinking. It wasn't, Sloan said, and it's not over. The next call was to Rhea Sullivan, 22 years old, 3 weeks removed from her assault. Her voice shook throughout the entire conversation. They said I wanted it, Rhea whispered. Said I must have been asking for it by being there alone at night. But I wasn't alone. There were other people in the building. I thought I was safe. You were never safe, Sloan said. Not because of anything you did, but because they chose to be predators instead of protectors. I sent you photos. Did you get them? I did. Purple and yellow handprints, defensive wounds on your forearms, bruising consistent with restraint. My company commander said those could have come from training, from combatives drills. He said unless I had proof it was intentional assault, there was nothing he could do. He was wrong, and he's about to find out exactly how wrong. By the time Sloan finished the fourth call, the sun had set completely. Her quarters were dark except for the glow of her laptop screen. She sat in silence for a long time, letting the weight of those conversations settle. 4 women, 4 stories, same pattern, same predators, same system that enabled them. She opened her laptop and began compiling everything into a single encrypted file. Testimony, photos, medical records, transfer requests. A mosaic of evidence that painted a picture impossible to ignore. Then she accessed a server that didn't officially exist and began her real work. The file directory appeared on screen, labeled with an innocuous name that would mean nothing to anyone who stumbled across it. But Sloan knew what she was looking for. She entered a series of credentials, waited while security protocols verified her identity. 3 layers deep, 4, 5. The folder opened. Inside were 83 video files, each one time-stamped, each one labeled with a cryptic alphanumeric code, each one a piece of evidence that Chief Master Sergeant Victor Creed had been collecting for 4 years. Sloan opened the first file. The video quality was surprisingly good. Professional camera work, stable footage, someone who knew what they were doing. The location was the cold plunge room at the old recreation facility. The timestamp read 2021-06-17, 22:34:18. 3 men entered the frame, 2 in PT gear, 1 holding a phone. A woman was already in the room, early 20s, athletic build. She turned when she heard them enter, smiled, said something Sloan couldn't hear because the video had no audio. Then the smile faded. Sloan watched for 30 seconds, saw enough to understand, closed the file with her jaw clenched so tight her molars ground together. She didn't need to watch the other 82 videos. She understood the system now. Victor Creed wasn't just protecting predators, he was documenting them, recording their assaults, keeping the evidence as leverage, as control, as an insurance policy that ensured no one under his protection would ever turn on him, because doing so would mean destroying themselves. It was brilliant in its cruelty, diabolical in its simplicity, and it was exactly what Sloan needed to burn his entire operation to the ground. She copied the folder to 3 separate encrypted drives, uploaded it to 2 different secure servers. Then she composed a message to Commander Ilara Voss at JAG. Located primary evidence. Creed has been documenting assaults for leverage. 83 videos spanning 4 years. Multiple victims, multiple perpetrators. This is bigger than Rourke's crew. Recommend immediate coordination. The response came back within minutes. Jesus Christ. Copy secured. JAG spinning up task force. Do not engage until backup is in place. Repeat, do not engage. Sloan stared at the message. Then she typed back, acknowledged. But if opportunity presents, I'm taking it. The response was 2 words, be careful. Sloan powered down the computer and sat in the darkness of her quarters. Outside the base continued its nightly rhythm, Marines finishing shifts, lights going out in barracks. The machine grinding forward, oblivious to the cancer growing in its belly. She stood and walked to the window, touched the knife at her back, felt the engraving under her fingertips. Patience defeats chaos. Somewhere out there, 4 men were planning their next hunt. Thursday nights, that's when they operated. That's when the facility had the lowest traffic. That's when they felt safest. It was Wednesday night, Sloan made her decision. She could wait for backup, should wait for backup. Let JAG build their case carefully over weeks or months, or she could give them everything they needed in one night. The memory came unbidden. 4 years ago, desert training facility outside San Diego. Blackwell running her through combat scenarios in 100-degree heat. "You're good," he'd said after she'd taken down 3 opponents in succession. "Fast, technical. But you're not thinking like a hunter yet." "What's the difference?" "Hunters don't react, they orchestrate." He'd handed her a water bottle. "Predators are reactive animals. They see prey, they attack. It's instinct. But hunters create the conditions for the hunt. They choose the ground. They control the variables. They make the prey come to them." "How?" Blackwell had smiled. That rare expression that meant he was about to teach something important. "You give them what they think they want. You make yourself look vulnerable. You let them believe they're in control. And when they commit, when they reveal their true nature, that's when you spring the trap." "Isn't that bait?" "No, bait is passive. This is active. You're not waiting to be taken. You're inviting the attack so you can control how it happens. There's a difference between being a victim and choosing to appear as one." The memory faded. The present reasserted itself. Sloan knew what she had to do. At 2100 hours, Sloan dressed carefully. Athletic shorts, sports bra, navy t-shirt, running shoes. She looked like someone planning a late workout. Someone who didn't know the unwritten rules about where women should and shouldn't be after dark. She clipped the Fairbairn Sykes knife inside her waistband hidden beneath her shirt, placed a button-sized camera on her collar disguised as a name tag backing, activated a voice recorder in her phone, and slipped it into a small bag with a towel and water bottle. Then she sent a message to Commander Voss. "Going dark. Protocol red line active. If you don't hear from me in 2 hours, execute contingency." The response was immediate. "Negative. Stand down. Backup ETA 6 hours." Sloan looked at the message for a long moment. 6 hours. By then another Thursday would have passed. Another opportunity for them to strike. Another potential victim. She thought about Dane, about the suicide note he'd left, about the system that had failed him because everyone was waiting for the perfect moment to act. Perfect moments didn't exist. There were only moments you chose to seize or let slip away. She turned off her phone and left it in her quarters. The walk to the old recreation facility took 15 minutes. The base was quiet at this hour, most personnel either in their quarters or at the enlisted club. The few people she passed barely glanced at her. Just another officer getting in some evening exercise. The building's exterior lights cast long shadows across the parking lot. 2 vehicles sat near the far corner. A truck and a sedan, both with base decals, both empty. Sloan paused before entering, checked her watch. 21:30, late enough that most people had cleared out, early enough that she could plausibly claim she didn't know the unofficial closing time. She entered through the main door. Inside, the facility was exactly as the survivors had described. Faded tile floors, fluorescent lights, half of them flickering, the smell of chlorine and old sweat, a reception desk that hadn't been staffed in years. She moved deeper into the building, past darkened offices and empty training rooms, following signs toward the locker corridors and cold plunge pools. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. Behind her, the entrance door swung shut with a heavy click. Sloan found the women's changing area and set her bag on a bench, arranged her towel just so with the voice recorder wrapped inside, positioned to capture audio from multiple angles. The button camera on her collar was already recording, its tiny lens capturing everything in high definition. She took her time changing, making noise, letting anyone who might be listening know exactly where she was. Her heart rate was steady, 56 beats per minute according to her smartwatch. Not quite combat calm yet, but getting there. She thought about Blackwell's final lesson, the one he'd given her 3 days before he died. She'd sat beside his hospital bed holding his hand, and he'd gripped back with what little strength remained. "When you face them," he'd whispered, "and you will face them. Remember, this fear is information. It tells you something matters, but it doesn't get to make decisions. You do. What if I freeze? You won't. You've trained too hard. But if doubt comes, if that voice in your head says you can't do this, you tell it to shut up and watch." He'd smiled weakly. "Then you show it exactly what you're capable of." Sloan finished changing, picked up her towel, walked barefoot toward the cold plunge room. The tile was cold under her feet. The hallway stretched ahead, fluorescent lights creating pools of brightness and shadow. She didn't have to wait long. The first sound was boots on tile. Multiple sets, moving with purpose but not urgency. The sound of men who knew exactly where they were going and didn't expect resistance. Sloane stood beside the plunge pool, hands loose at her sides, breathing steady. She counted the footsteps. 4 sets, 4 men, right on schedule. Her heart rate dropped, 54 beats per minute. Combat calm achieved, the state where time slowed, where details sharpened, where fear became fuel instead of paralysis. The door to the plunge room opened. Garrett Rourke stepped through first. His expression shifted from casual confidence to predatory focus the moment he saw her. Behind him came Lucas Brennan, broader and meaner, already smiling. Then Owen Cavanaugh, phone-in-hand camera already recording. And finally Tyler Winslow, younger and uncertain, hanging back near the doorway. Rourke's smile was the kind that never reached his eyes. Well, well, lost sweetheart. Sloane met his gaze without blinking. Let the silence stretch for 3 seconds, long enough to make them wonder. Internal assessment running automatically. Training taking over. Rourke Staff Sergeant 32, 6'1", 190 pounds. Center of gravity high. Overconfident. Will lead with his right. Expects size to intimidate. Brennan Corporal 35'11", 210. Boxer build. Power over technique. Favors hooks. Gets angry when challenged. Cavanaugh Specialist 29'5'9", 160. Distracted by phone. Non-combatant, liability not threat. Winslow Private 19'5'10", 150. Doesn't want to be here. Potential ally. More likely to run than fight. All of this processed in less than 2 seconds. Then she spoke, her voice level and cold. Actually, I'm exactly where I need to be. Brennan laughed, the sound harsh and ugly. She's got attitude, I like that. Facilities closed after 2200, Rourke said, still smiling, taking a step closer. Didn't anyone tell you? I must have missed that in my welcome packet. You missed a lot of things. Another step. He was 3 meters away now, close enough to crowd her personal space, far enough to maintain plausible deniability. Brennan moved to flank her on the left. Cavanaugh stayed near the door, phone up, recording this. Sloane tracked their positions without moving her head. Rourke at 12 o'clock, 3 meters. Brennan at 10 o'clock, 2 meters. Cavanaugh at 9 o'clock, 4 meters. Winslow at the door, 5 meters. She had the pool at her back. Only one exit. 4 men between her and freedom. They thought they had her cornered. They had no idea they were the ones trapped. It's sort of an after-hours thing, Rourke continued. Unofficial policy, you understand? I understand perfectly, Sloane said. Her hand drifted toward the knife at her back. Not drawing it. Not yet. Just touching it. Feeling the leather-wrapped handle. Feeling Blackwell's presence like a ghost standing beside her. Patience defeats chaos. Not yet. Let them cross the line first. Let them commit. Let them reveal themselves so completely that no lawyer, no sympathetic commander, no institutional protection could save them. Rourke took another step. 2 meters now. Close enough that she could see the calculation in his eyes. Close enough that he thought he had her. You know, he said, voice dropping to something meant to sound friendly, you really shouldn't be here alone this late. Dangerous. Never know what might happen. There it was. The threat disguised as concern. The predator's calling card. Brennan's hand closed on her shoulder. The legal threshold crossed. Unwanted physical contact. Witnessed. Recorded. Incontrovertible. The attack had been coming. Sloane had seen it in his body language. In the way his weight shifted forward in the microsecond before he moved. In the slight tensing of his shoulders that telegraphed his intention. She'd been waiting for it. Preparing for it. Every nerve in her body coiled like a spring compressed to its limit. His hand closed on her bare shoulder. Skin on skin, fingers digging in with intent to restrain. Sloane moved. Her left hand snapped up. Not a slap, not a push, a strike. Fingers rigid like a blade. Driving into the cluster of nerves at the base of Brennan's wrist, exactly where the radial nerve ran closest to the surface. The strike was precise, surgical. 8 years of training compressed into a single motion executed with perfect biomechanics. His grip spasmed open involuntarily. The radial nerve screaming messages of pain and confusion to a brain that couldn't process what had just happened. Before his hand had fully released, before the neurons had finished firing, before his conscious mind could begin to respond, Sloane was already transitioning to phase 2. Her right elbow came up and around in a tight arc. No wasted motion. Pure efficiency. The point of her elbow, the hardest part of the human arm, drove into the brachial plexus. That cluster of nerves above the collarbone that controlled his entire right arm. The impact was perfect. 8 pounds of pressure per square inch focused on a target the size of a quarter. The nerve cluster short-circuited. His entire right side went dead. The arm hung useless signals from brain to muscle, severed as effectively as if she'd cut the wires. His eyes went wide, shock registering, pain following a microsecond behind. But Sloan was already moving to phase 3. She caught his now useless right arm with both hands, used his own forward momentum against him. Basic judo principle, executed with combat efficiency. His mass plus his momentum became her weapon. She pivoted, hip connecting with his midsection. His 210 pounds suddenly weightless as physics took over. Leverage defeating strength. And then she drove her knee up and forward. Not wild, not rushed, controlled, targeting his solar plexus. That cluster of nerves behind the sternum where a solid impact could temporarily paralyze the diaphragm. The air left his lungs in an explosive rush, his body's automatic response to sudden trauma overriding everything else. She maintained control of his arm, twisted him around, used his body as both shield and battering ram, and drove him backward toward the concrete edge of the plunge pool. The impact was precise, calculated. The back of his skull connected with the pool's edge with a sound like a hammer hitting meat. Not hard enough to kill, hard enough to render him unconscious or close to it, hard enough to remove him from the fight completely. Brennan collapsed, body going slack, one hand trying to cradle both his head and his dead arm simultaneously. Gasping, semi-conscious, no longer a threat. Total elapsed time from initial contact to neutralization 4.3 seconds. Across the room, Kavanaugh's phone captured everything. Somewhere on a live stream, Sloan had set up through a backdoor connection, Briar Montgomery was watching. Watching someone fight back. Watching someone win. Watching proof that resistance was possible. Rourke's smile had vanished. His face cycled through emotions in rapid succession. Surprise, disbelief, calculation, anger. Then he lunged. No technique, no training, just raw aggression born from years of getting away with violence because he was bigger and stronger than his victims. But Sloan had trained against men bigger and stronger for 8 years. She'd spent thousands of hours learning how to turn size into a disadvantage, how to make strength a liability. As his arms came forward to grab or strike, she was already moving. Sidestep, pivot, hip placement, perfect. Her hip connected with his midsection as she grabbed his shirt with both hands. And suddenly, all his forward momentum, all his mass, all his strength became rotational energy that she controlled. Classic Ogoshi hip throw, Judo 101, but executed with the precision of someone who'd practiced the motion 10,000 times until it became muscle memory, until it became instinct. Rourke went over her hip, his feet left the ground. For a fraction of a second, he was airborne horizontal, completely helpless. Then he slammed into the tiled floor with enough force to crack one of the tiles. The impact drove the air from his lungs. His head bounced once, not enough to cause serious injury, but enough to ring his bell hard, to make his vision blur, to make his body forget how to respond to commands from his brain. Before he could recover, before his nervous system could reboot, Sloan dropped. One knee on his chest, full body weight behind it, one hand controlling his right wrist, the other poised at his throat. Not pressing, not yet, just there. A reminder of how quickly this could escalate if he made the wrong choice. She leaned close, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of 6 years of preparation. Mistake number 1, assuming I was prey. Rourke's eyes were wide, confused, the look of a predator who'd suddenly discovered the food chain had inverted, that he'd been hunting something further up the evolutionary ladder. He tried to buck her off, tried to use his greater mass to dislodge her. She increased pressure on his wrist, bending it at an angle that sent sharp pain signals screaming up his arm. Not breaking it, not yet, but showing him exactly how close he was to a fractured radius. "Stay down," she said, voice still quiet, "or I break this." He stopped moving. Her face was inches from his, cold, controlled, not triumph, not anger, just the absolute certainty of someone who'd spent 6 years preparing for this exact moment, who'd run this scenario in her head 10,000 times, who knew every possible outcome and had planned for all of them. Total time since Brennan's initial contact, 11 seconds. Kavanaugh stood frozen near the door, his phone wavering in his hand, the expression on his face cycling through shocked disbelief and dawning horror. The recording was still running, capturing everything. Audio and video, Federal evidence being created in real time. Leave it, Sloan said, still kneeling on Rourke. Keep recording. What? His voice cracked. Evidence. She looked directly at the phone's camera lens, making eye contact with the future jury. Timestamp 2247, Thursday, November 14th, 2025. 4 subjects entered this facility with intent to commit sexual assault on a federal officer conducting an undercover investigation. She increased pressure on Rourke's wrist until he gasped. Subject 1, Staff Sergeant Garrett, Michael Rourke, service number 8046329. You're insane, Rourke managed through gritted teeth. Subject 2? Sloan nodded toward Brennan, who was still slumped against the pool edge, barely conscious. Corporal Lucas Brennan. Subject 3, Specialist Owen Kavanaugh. Subject 4, Private Tyler Winslow. Winslow, still standing in the doorway, raised his hand slowly, his face pale, his entire body trembling. I wasn't going to. Smart, Sloan said, her eyes never leaving Rourke. Stay there, don't move, don't speak. She released Rourke's wrist and stood in one fluid motion, putting 3 meters of distance between herself and the 3 threats, still mobile, maintaining visual contact with all of them, positioning herself so the pool was no longer at her back. Rourke stayed on the floor, cradling his arm, his face flushed with humiliation and rage, and the slowly dawning realization of what had just happened to his life. Use of force authorized under Title 10 United States Code, Section 8003. Sloan continued, still speaking to Kavanaugh's camera. Federal officer defending against attempted sexual assault. Perpetrators have been identified and subdued. Federal jurisdiction applies. Naval Criminal Investigative Service has operational authority. Federal, Kavanaugh's voice was barely audible. What are you talking about? Sloan reached beneath her shirt, pulled out the badge she'd kept hidden since arriving on base, held it up to the camera, letting the light catch the seal embossed in its center, letting the full weight of federal authority become visible and incontrovertible. Lieutenant Commander Sloan Maddox, Naval Criminal Investigative Service Special Activities Division. She paused. Let that penetrate. Let them understand exactly how wrong their assumptions had been. You're all under arrest. The words hung in the air like a detonation, like the moment between lightning and thunder when you know the shockwave is coming but haven't felt it yet. Rourke's face went white, all the blood draining away, all the confidence evaporating, leaving behind only the terrified animal understanding that the hunt had reversed. Brennan made a sound somewhere between a groan and a sob, barely conscious but aware enough to understand his life had just ended. Kavanaugh's phone slipped from his fingers, clattered on the tile, but kept recording. The lens now pointed at the ceiling, but the audio still capturing everything. Winslow took a step backward toward the door. Private Winslow, Sloan said, her voice sharp. I wouldn't. He froze. You didn't participate. You didn't touch me. Right now you're a witness, not a perpetrator. But if you run that changes, you understand. He nodded slowly, hands still raised, looking like he was about 17 instead of 19. Good. Stay exactly where you are. Rourke finally found his voice. It came out hollow, defeated. They'll bury this. Creed will make this go away. Thorne will protect us. We're decorated Marines. You're just... Chief Creed is already done. Sloan cut him off, her voice cold enough to frost glass. I have his insurance files, all 83 videos, every assault he documented for the past 4 years, every perpetrator he thought he was protecting, every victim he thought would stay silent. The color drained from Rourke's face completely, from white to gray, the look of a man watching his entire reality collapse in real time. How did you? Because I'm not some random officer here for a courtesy inspection. I was sent here specifically to end you, to investigate the pattern of assaults you've been committing for 3 years, and you just gave me everything I needed. She pulled a radio from her bag, one she'd kept silent until now. Keyed the mic. Maddox to Voss. Operation Sunlight is active. I have 4 subjects detained at target facility. Request immediate MP response and JAG notification. The radio crackled. Commander Voss's voice came through tight with barely controlled relief and fury. Maddox, when I explicitly ordered you to stand down, what part was unclear? The part where someone else became a victim while we waited for the perfect moment that doesn't exist, ma'am. A pause, long enough that Sloan could hear Voss counting to 10. MP's en route, ETA 3 minutes. Are you secure? Affirmative. We're going to have a very long conversation about the chain of command. Looking forward to it, ma'am. Voss out. Sloane clipped the radio back to her belt and surveyed the room one final time. Rourke still on the floor, defeated, the predator realizing he'd become prey. Brennan barely conscious, blood trickling from where his head had struck concrete, his arms still useless. Kavanaugh in shock, staring at his phone like it had become a snake, like the device that had recorded so many assaults had just recorded his own destruction. Winslow in the doorway, hands raised, looking younger by the second, looking like a kid who'd made terrible choices and was only now understanding the consequences. Four men who'd thought they owned this space, who'd thought they could take whatever they wanted, who'd thought the uniform made them untouchable. They'd been wrong about everything. The sound of boots in the corridor announced the arrival of military police, 6 of them led by Sergeant Kira Wolf, weapons drawn, moving with tactical precision. They entered the room, assessed the situation in seconds, and began securing the scene with professional efficiency. Wolf approached Sloane first, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes showing something like awe. "Commander Maddox." "That's correct." "Ma'am, are you injured?" "Negative." Wolf's eyes tracked across the room, taking in Brennan against the pool, Rourke on the floor, the phone still recording near Kavanaugh's feet, the button camera on Sloane's collar still blinking red. When she looked back at Sloane, something had shifted in her expression. Respect mixed with disbelief. "What happened here, ma'am?" 4 subjects attempted sexual assault on a federal officer conducting an undercover investigation. Force was used in self-defense within authorized parameters. All actions were recorded via multiple devices. She gestured to the button camera on her collar and the phone on the floor. Full documentation available for evidence processing. Wolf nodded slowly, turned to her team. "Secure the subjects. Separate them. No communication between detainees. Winslow stays physically separate from the others. He's being classified as a witness pending further investigation." The MPs moved with practiced efficiency, cuffing Rourke, helping Brennan to his feet, his right arm still hanging useless, collecting Kavanaugh's phone as evidence, guiding Winslow to a separate corner. Through it all, Sloane stood perfectly still, breathing steady, heart rate already dropping back to normal, 58 beats per minute. The adrenaline crash would come eventually, but not yet, not until she was alone. The door opened again. Colonel Marcus Thorne entered, his face ashen, his uniform hastily thrown on shirt misbuttoned. He stopped when he saw the scene, his eyes moving from the detained men to Sloane and back again. "Commander Maddox," he said carefully, like he was navigating a minefield. "What is the meaning of this?" "These 4 men attempted to commit sexual assault on a federal officer, sir. I have documentation, video evidence, witness testimony. They're being detained pending formal charges." "This is..." Thorne's mouth worked soundlessly. "This is highly irregular. I should have been notified before any action was taken. As base commander, I have authority over..." "With respect, sir." Sloane cut him off, her voice level, but carrying the weight of federal authority. "You were notified 3 years ago when the first complaint was filed, 2 years ago when the second and third complaints were filed, 8 months ago when Corporal Blake's complaint was filed, 6 months ago when 2 more complaints were filed." She took a step toward him. "You chose not to act. You chose to mark every single case as unsubstantiated. You chose to close investigations without interviewing witnesses. You chose to recommend stress counseling instead of justice. So no, sir. You don't get to claim authority now." Thorne's face reddened. "You have no authority to..." "Actually, sir, I have complete authority." She pulled the sealed orders from her bag, still in their protective envelope, the paper crisp and official, handed them to him. "I suggest you read those carefully." Thorne opened the envelope with shaking hands. Read the first page. Went pale. Read the second page. Sat down heavily on a nearby bench like his legs had stopped working. "You were sent by..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Naval Criminal Investigative Service under direct orders from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. My assignment here was specifically to investigate systematic predatory behavior and institutional complicity in covering it up." And Sloane's voice was colder than it had been all night. "Congratulations, Colonel. You're now part of that investigation." The room had gone completely silent. Even Rourke had stopped struggling. Even Brennan had stopped groaning. Thorne sat on the bench, the orders in his lap, his career disintegrating in real time, his legacy transforming from decorated combat veteran to the commander who let predators operate freely for 3 years. "I didn't know," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "I didn't know it was this bad." You didn't ask, Sloan replied. And that's worse, because asking would have required admitting something was wrong. And admitting something was wrong would have required taking action. And taking action might have been uncomfortable or career-limiting or politically difficult. She paused. So you chose comfort over justice. You chose your career over your Marines. You chose institutional protection over the people you were sworn to protect. The door opened one more time. A woman in Navy working khakis entered, carrying a briefcase that screamed, "JAG officer." Commander Alara Voss, whose voice Sloan had heard over radio, but whose face she was seeing for the first time. Voss took one look at the scene and let out a long breath. "Maddox," her voice was tight. "When I said stand down, I meant stand down." Tactical flexibility, ma'am. That's one way to put it. Voss's expression was professionally neutral, but there was steel underneath. "Sergeant Wolf, get these four to holding. Separate cells. No communication. Colonel Thorne, you're going to want to call your lawyer." Thorne looked up, confusion adding to his shock. "My lawyer, I didn't—" "You received 3 formal complaints about sexual assault in this facility in the past 36 months, sir. You marked each one as unsubstantiated and closed the cases without proper investigation. That's dereliction of duty at minimum. Possibly obstruction of justice depending on what we find when we dig deeper." Voss's voice was professional but unforgiving. "So, yes, Colonel, your lawyer." As the MPs led the detained men away in handcuffs, as Thorne sat in stunned silence processing the end of his career, as Voss began photographing the scene and collecting evidence, Sloan finally allowed herself to move. She retrieved her towel from the locker room, wrapped it around her shoulders, walked out into the night air. The base was still quiet, stars visible above despite the light pollution. The Pacific Ocean audible in the distance, waves against shore, eternal and indifferent to human drama. Sloane's hands were shaking now. The adrenaline crash arriving right on schedule. 8 years of training, 6 years of preparation, 4 seconds of violence, 11 seconds total, and now the aftermath. She sat on a concrete barrier outside the facility and focused on her breathing. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. The technique Blackwell had taught her for managing post-combat stress. After a few minutes, Voss joined her, sitting on the barrier with a respectful distance between them, not speaking, just present. Finally, Voss broke the silence. "Your instructor, the one who trained you, what would he say about tonight?" Sloan thought about Blackwell, about his voice in her memory, about the lessons written on a knife, about the principle that had guided every decision she'd made tonight. He'd say patience defeats chaos, and that sometimes you have to let predators reveal themselves before you can stop them. Because once they do, they can never hide again. Voss was quiet for a moment. Then she simply nodded. "Tomorrow we start building the case that ends all of them. Creed, Thorne, everyone who knew and did nothing." Sloan stood, her legs steady again, her hands finally still, her heart rate back to normal. "Tomorrow we burn the whole system down." She touched the knife at her back one more time, felt the engraving under her fingertips. Patience defeats chaos. Tonight she'd been patient. She'd waited for them to cross every line, to commit fully, to reveal themselves completely. And now the chaos they'd created for years would finally consume them. Justice wasn't always swift, but when it came with absolute certainty. Dawn came cold and gray over Camp Pendleton, the kind of morning where fog rolled in from the Pacific and hung over the base like a shroud, muting colors and softening edges, until the whole world seemed constructed from memory rather than substance. Sloan had been awake for hours. Sleep had come in fits interrupted by replaying every moment from the night before. Not regret, not fear, just the inevitable processing that followed violence, even violence that was necessary and controlled. At 0600, her phone buzzed. 7 more came forward overnight. They heard what happened. They wanted to testify. Sloan stared at the message. 7, added to the 4 she'd already spoken with. 11 women whose voices had been silenced by fear and institutional indifference. 11 women who were now ready to speak because one woman had refused to be silent. She showered and dressed in her service khakis. The badge went on her belt where everyone could see it. The knife stayed at the small of her back where only she knew it existed. When she stepped outside, the base had already changed. Word had spread with the speed that only military gossip could achieve. She felt eyes on her as she walked toward the provost marshal's office. Conversations stopping mid-sentence. Marines stepping aside to let her pass. Not with fear, but with something that looked like respect mixed with disbelief. In the chow hall, a female corporal met her eyes and nodded once. Down the corridor, two female privates whispered to each other, glancing in her direction. One of them was crying. Sloan kept walking, spine straight, expression neutral. This wasn't about being a hero. This was about doing a job that should have been done years ago. The provost marshal's office was controlled chaos. MPs moving with purpose. JAG officers setting up a command center. Computer technicians establishing secure communications. Commander Voss orchestrated everything with practiced efficiency. She spotted Sloan and gestured her into a side office. The door closed, muting the chaos outside. "The task force wants a full debrief," Voss said. "But first off the record, did you plan for it to go down exactly the way it did?" Sloan considered the question carefully. "I planned for multiple scenarios. That was one of them. And if they'd been armed, if there had been 5 instead of 4, then I would have adapted. That's what training is for." Voss leaned back, studying her. "You know what's going to happen now, right? They're going to call you reckless. They're going to say, you should have waited for backup. Let them. It's going to get ugly. It was always going to get ugly. At least now it's ugly with evidence." The briefing lasted 2 hours. 6 JAG officers, 3 investigators, 2 victim advocates. They listened as Sloan walked them through everything. From arrival to arrest, every decision documented, every risk calculated. When she finished, Captain Dawson leaned forward. "You had Creed's files. You had witness testimony. Documentary evidence. Why not wait for us to arrive?" "Because they were hunting," Sloan said simply. "Every Thursday, like clockwork. If I'd waited, someone else would have become a victim while we filed paperwork. So you made yourself the target. I gave them an opportunity to reveal themselves. They took it. The interviews began at 1000 hours. 7 women, each with her own story, each following the same terrible pattern. Thursday nights, multiple attackers, threats, silence. Addison Blake went first. 24 years old, still on base, still seeing her attackers every day until last night. "I can't use elevators anymore," Addison said, hands clasped tight. "Can't be in any enclosed space with men I don't know. Last week I had a panic attack in a supply closet." She described the Thursday night 8 months ago. The cold plunge room, Rourke's charm turning predatory, Brennan's violence, Kavanaugh filming, Winslow watching. "They told me I was lying," she said, looking at Sloan. "My chain of command, the chaplain, everyone said I must have misunderstood, that these were good Marines who would never do something like that." "They were wrong," Sloan said. "I know that now." Addison wiped her eyes. "When I heard what you did when I saw them in handcuffs, I knew it was real. Your testimony is going to help ensure they never do this to anyone else." Addison's voice strengthened. "Good, because I want to watch them burn." The last interview was Rhea Sullivan, 22, 3 weeks removed from her assault, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her pieces together. "What was it like last night?" Rhea asked. "When they came for you," Sloan chose her words carefully. "It was exactly what I expected. They thought I was vulnerable. They thought I was alone. They were wrong on all counts. I wish I'd been able to fight back like you did." "You are fighting back, right now, by speaking the truth." Sloan held her gaze. "Violence isn't the only form of courage. Sometimes speaking is braver than fighting." Rhea's eyes filled with tears. "I want them to pay. I want them to lose everything." "They will. I promise you that." By 1900 hours, the investigation had metastasized. Creed's files had opened doorways into a network spanning 3 installations involving at least 15 perpetrators. NCIS field offices in North Carolina and Nevada were activated. Preliminary warrants issued for 2 former Marines. Sloan stood alone in the conference room after everyone left. 17 perpetrators, 5 bases, 24 victims identified so far. 24 women who'd carried this alone until now. She pulled out her phone, scrolled to a photo buried in encrypted folders. Dane in dress blues at his promotion ceremony, smiling, whole, before the system broke him. 24, she whispered to the empty room. 24 people who could have been you. Her fingers found the knife at her back. Blackwell's voice echoed, "Patience defeats chaos." But what defeats the chaos inside? She'd spent 6 years hunting predators, building cases, taking down networks. And every time she thought she'd found the bottom, another layer appeared underneath. Her phone buzzed. "Voss Creed in custody, requesting to speak with you directly." Sloan stared at the message. The man who'd built this machine wanted to talk to the woman tearing it apart. She typed back, "On my way." An hour later, Voss entered with a tablet and grim expression. "We have a problem." Creed's lawyered up, claiming his files are protected evidence obtained without a warrant. "I had authorization to access personnel files." His lawyers claiming the videos were personal property. "It's creating complications." Voss paused. "There's more. Quinn, he's the insider who disabled the Brig cameras. Cut power for exactly 4 minutes, long enough to release Rourke, Brennan, and Kavanaugh." Everything clicked into place. Quinn's nervousness, his evasive eyes. He'd been Creed's inside man from the beginning. Where is he now? "Left the base 4 hours ago. Vehicle found abandoned near Oceanside. He's running." "What about the others?" "They can't leave the base. They're somewhere in the infrastructure, underground tunnels, mechanical spaces." Sloan thought about the old facility, the spaces beneath it built during World War II and then forgotten. "I know where they are," she said. At 2200 hours, Sloan led a 6-person MP tactical team into the tunnels through a service entrance that wasn't on any current map. They moved in formation, night vision active, weapons ready. The tunnels were narrow, low-ceilinged, concrete walls slick with moisture, the smell of mildew and decay. They found evidence of occupation immediately. Food wrappers, empty bottles, a sleeping bag still warm. "They're close," Sloan whispered. They found Kavanaugh in a side room frantically trying to delete files from his phone. When the tactical lights hit him, he dropped the phone and raised his hands. "Don't shoot, I'm unarmed." Sloan retrieved the phone. Deletion had failed. Cloud backup captured everything. "Too late," she said. "We already have copies. All you've done is add destruction of evidence to your charges." They left him with 2 MPs and continued deeper. The main passage opened into a central hub where multiple tunnels converged. There, illuminated by a battery lantern, stood Rourke and Brennan. Rourke's back was to a server room door, the old equipment that had stored Creed's files, the evidence they thought they could still destroy. "Commander Maddox," Rourke said, "came to finish the drawing." Sloan raised her weapon. Red laser dots painted Rourke's chest. "It's over, you're surrounded, hands up, on the ground." "Quinn was supposed to get us out," Rourke said, voice hollow. "Where is he?" "Already in custody. Gave up Creed. Gave up Thorne, gave up you, 20 minutes after we picked him up trying to cross into Mexico." Rourke's face went slack. "No. Everyone's selling everyone out now," Sloan said. "That's what happens when the system breaks." Brennan's eyes darted between the MPs and the tunnel. Calculating odds, realizing they weren't good. "You said no one would find out." Brennan's voice cracked. "You said Creed would protect us, but she proved it. She documented everything. And now we're going to spend the rest of our lives in prison because you convinced us we were untouchable." "Shut up," Rourke said, but Brennan dropped to his knees, hands on his head. "I'm done. I surrender." The MP team moved forward, securing Brennan while keeping weapons trained on Rourke. 2 more MPs emerged from a side passage, cutting off escape. Rourke looked around the chamber, saw the walls closing in, saw his future collapsing into a cell. Finally, he raised his hands. "I want a lawyer," he said quietly. "You'll get one," Sloan said, "right after you spend the night in a cell thinking about every woman whose life you destroyed." They cuffed him and let him out. As they emerged into the night air, Sloan saw dawn beginning to break over the Pacific. Somewhere 11 women were waking up knowing their attackers were finally in custody with no chance of escape. Voss appeared beside her holding coffee. "You look like hell." "I feel worse, but we got them, all of them. This is going to get bigger before it's done. Are you ready for that?" Sloan thought about the women she'd interviewed, about Rhea and Addison and Breyer, about the ones who hadn't come forward yet but might now. "I'm ready." 3 hours after the tunnel arrest, Sloan stood outside Creed's holding cell. Through reinforced glass, she watched him sit on a metal bench. Hands cuffed, orange jumpsuit, the architect of a decade-long network reduced to prisoner number 4729. He looked up when the door opened. His eyes met hers. "Commander Maddox." His voice was calm, almost friendly. "I wondered when you'd come." "I'm not here to talk," Sloan said. "I'm here so you can see the face of the person who ended you." "Ended me," Creed smiled. "You think this ends with me? This is bigger than 4 idiots at Pendleton. The system that let me operate for 10 years isn't going anywhere." "Maybe not, but you are. 20 years, 25. He leaned forward. "I'll be 76 when I get out. You'll still be hunting, still finding new networks, still realizing that every time you cut off one head, 2 more grow back." Sloane's fingers touched the knife at her back. You're right about one thing. I'll still be hunting. But here's what you don't understand. She stepped closer to the glass. Every network I dismantle, I learn. Every predator I take down, I get better. And every victim who speaks because I proved it's possible makes the next hunt easier. She turned to leave. You didn't end me, Creed. You ended yourself the moment you thought you were untouchable. That evening, Sloan drove to Arlington National Cemetery. Section 60, row 15, plot 847. Dane's headstone was simple gray marble. Corporal Dane Maddox, beloved son, brother, Marine. She knelt in the grass, pulled Blackwell's knife from her jacket, laid it on the granite just for a moment. They went down Dane, all of them. Rourke, Brennan, Kavanaugh, Creed, Thorne, Quinn, 17 more across 5 bases. Her voice was steady. It won't bring you back. But maybe it means the next person who speaks up won't be told they're lying. The knife gleamed in fading sunlight. She picked it up, returned it to her jacket. I'm not done. There are more out there. I'll find them. I promise. She stood, walked back to her car. Tomorrow she'd fly to Fort Hood. But tonight she'd given Dane what he never got in life, justice. 6 weeks later, the courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Rourke stood at attention, his face carved from stone, his military career ending with the words that would follow him for the rest of his life. Guilty on all counts. In the gallery, Rhea Sullivan reached for Addison Blake's hand. Briar Montgomery closed her eyes and breathed. 7 other women who had testified sat together, a united front of survivors who'd refused to be silenced. The sentencing came down like hammer blows. 12 years for Rourke, 10 for Brennan, 6 for Kavanaugh, all with dishonorable discharges, all with registry requirements that would mark them as predators for life. Sloan stood in the back of the courtroom as the judge's gavel fell. The numbers meant less than the faces in the gallery. Addison turned in her seat, found Sloan's eyes mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Sloan shook her head slightly. No thanks needed. This was debt, not charity. Debt to Dane. Debt to every person the system failed. Rhea was crying, not from trauma, from relief. The kind that only comes when you're finally believed. That was worth more than any verdict. Sloan slipped out before anyone could approach. She'd done what she came to do. The rest was theirs to carry forward. Victor Creed's arraignment happened 72 hours later. Sloan watched via encrypted video feed from 35,000 feet already en route to Texas. Creed sat in chains. His lawyer argued for bail, citing 30 years of distinguished service. The prosecutor stood and listed 83 counts of conspiracy to commit sexual assault, 17 perpetrators, 24 victims identified. Evidence so overwhelming the defense had already floated plea discussions. The judge set bail at $5 million cash. Creed's face never changed, but as they let him out, his eyes found the camera, found Sloan through the lens. She met his gaze, didn't blink, didn't smile, just watched until the door closed behind him. Predators eventually learned what prey always knew: the hunt only ends when the hunter decides it ends. Creed's hunt was over. At Camp Pendleton, the old facility had been renovated. A bronze plaque on the wall read, "For those who survived and those who spoke, your voices matter." In memory of Master Chief Thaddeus Blackwell and Corporal Dane Maddox, who taught us to fight for justice. Sloan didn't attend the dedication ceremony. She was already at Fort Hood, walking across the parade ground with her go-bag over her shoulder, past Marines who saluted without knowing why, past buildings that held secrets she would uncover. She pulled out the knife one last time, ran her thumb over the engraving. Patience defeats chaos. Blackwell's voice echoed in her memory. Let them reveal themselves, because once they do, they can never hide again. She'd been patient. She'd let Rourke's crew reveal themselves. And when they did, she'd brought the case. Somewhere on this base, another woman was afraid. Another predator thought he was safe. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. A text from Addison Blake. We unveiled the plaque today. Wish you'd been there. Thank you for teaching us we could fight back. Sloan typed a reply. You taught yourselves. I just showed you it was possible. She secured the knife at her back and headed toward the admin building. The work wasn't done. It would never be done. But every predator she brought down, every victim who found their voice, every system she forced to confront its rot, was another step toward the world Dane had deserved to live in. A world where speaking the truth didn't cost you everything. A world where the uniform meant protection, not predation. That world didn't exist yet. But Sloan Maddox would keep building it one case at a time until her last breath. And if that made her a hunter instead of a hero, so be it. Predators needed hunters, and she was just getting started.